Wonderful.
I am so privileged today to introduce to you Dr. Saida Desalegn and Aaron Michael. They are the authors, researchers, and speakers helping couples heal from infidelity and bringing a synergistic approach to sexuality. They recently had an article published in Authority magazine entitled Rebuilding Trust After Infidelity. Saida, you had a very loving, in love parents, but your childhood home was also a shelter for abused women. How did that
Mhm.
influence your perception of a loving relationship?
Well, first of all, because my parents were so stable, it clearly in my own nervous system uh, anchored that this is possible, that there is a possibility for healthy, stable relations, even though there was a lot of chaos and pain around because of the parental unit being so solid. They brought up very solid kids, even amongst that chaos.
You know, many of the couples that I coach, I'll ask them, is there any relationship in your life, marriage, that you would like to emulate? And so many of them can't think of even one. So it's very fortunate when you have parents who provide that model of a very stable, loving relationship. Aaron, I love that you said that the foundation of a healthy society is a healthy family. Your
Yes.
parents were and still are very much in love. What sparked your interest in healing unhealthy marriages?
Well, I just had a lot of friends always coming to me talking about their relationships. And frankly, it really wasn't until university that I realized how rare it was to actually have parents that were in love
Mhm.
and that were still together, and friends, family, and also just really partners in life. And
Yes.
so it was I remember I had a girlfriend once in Denmark, and that's when it really hit me, where she told me, Aaron, I don't have a single person in my life, like you're saying with your clients, where they've actually lasted in a marriage, except for my grandparents. And my grandmother told me that if it was allowed back in her day, she would have wanted a divorce.
Oh, dear, how sad.
Yeah.
Very sad. So the contrast between your experience with your parents and what you saw around you is what sparked your interest.
Yes, I wanted people to be able to have that.
Great goal, great purpose in life, isn't it? You both
Yes.
Yes.
you both have experienced the pain of betrayal in previous relationships. What was the immediate impact on you? And then what were the things that were most important to help you regain your personal balance?
Mhm. I think the immediate impact is devastation because in my heart, because of how my parents were, you don't treat each other that way. That's not what happens with love. And because it led to divorce, it was devastating because my parents, they've never talked about divorce. It's never been on the table. And I never dreamed that I was going to get married and then divorce. And then it happened 3 times. And the betrayals each time broke me more and more because I kept kind of going for a glimmer of hope, and then it would happen again. And so by the third time, it's like, this must have something to do with me now, because it can't just be the other person in the wrong. And that's when things started to change, is when I started to take some self-responsibility for the choices I was making, for kind of also choosing to be willfully blind to certain situations, also unable to articulate my boundaries clearly and healthily, being afraid of saying, like, this actually doesn't work for me, because I wanted to make sure that I was always a very kind and loving partner, and I didn't want to be, disruptive. So all of those things emerged from the betrayal experiences. But in the learning to use my voice to advocate for myself, to know what my non-negotiables were, then I ended up in a very different relationship, one where I don't think I've ever experienced love quite like this, where there is deep respect and a lot of kindness.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You know, it seems like so many of the people I interview talk about their non-negotiables and how important it is to know what your non-negotiables are and then be prepared to stand up for them.
Yes.
So, how about you, Erin? What was infidelity like for you, or betrayal?
Well, the first reaction really was just a deep sense of confusion because I didn't really understand why it would happen. Because I noticed a lot of times the partners that were most likely to cheat were also the ones that were the most worried about being cheated on. And so it
Yeah.
really kind of confused me. And I was just wondering why it was that they kind of had this incessant kind of need of vigilance that something like this wouldn't happen, and then that they would go out and do it. It just created a lot of a lot of confusion. And I think my early days reactions when I was younger was to be very just, well, you're a free person, I want you to be able to do what you want. and and then when I wouldn't react with like anger or jealousy, it normally then would create even more distress inside them. And that's where I think our website embodied love comes from, because with embodied love we speak about the importance of what actually makes love, that love isn't just a kind of feeling that one has, but instead it's actually a series of choices and actions. And there's a cycle we speak about, which is truth, responsibility, trust, and celebration. So, in my own way, figuring out that, okay, stating my clear desires, not just my boundaries, but really what I wanted out of the relationship, and making that truth strongly known, it gave my partners as well as myself the ability to respond, to then create trust, and ultimately enter into relational celebration. And then that becomes a cycle and brings things in the right direction.
I love both of your responses to that question. And it sounds like your personal experience really has informed the direction of your lives and your professions. You both named boredom or feeling taken for granted as one of the precursors to infidelity. I frequently hear in my practice I'm unappreciated as the
Yeah.
prompt for seeking help. What
Mhm.
behaviors or attitudes can couples adopt or cultivate that keep a couple's love alive and vibrant?
Ooh, I love that
Great question.
question. I had heard a long time ago, I think when I was healing from betrayal, someone, a wise woman had said something like, well, appreciation is lubrication. It's the thing that keeps the guy like interested. I'm like, what? And that's just really
That's so true.
weird. And then I started realizing, but that's also true for me. And
Yes.
so I started to, not only in my intimate relations, but family relations and work relations, articulating my appreciations every day, even if it's a little thing like, oh, thank you so much for completing that or bringing this to me, or just giving me that smile right now. I really needed it. And having that consistent reflection of your impact in my life is meaningful, and I am grateful that you're here. And doing that was through appreciation. So I found it felt really good to do that, because then I was paying attention to the things that I was loving versus just the things that were wrong.
I love that answer. Do you have anything to add to that, Erin?
Well, it's interesting because you're essentially asking about, in one sense, what is long-term romance, which supposedly shouldn't exist. And I have to say, when I was writing my master's thesis on looking for like interaction behaviors, patterns of behavior when it comes to love, I looked a lot into attachment theory and the psychology and the neuroscience of love. And I went over probably about 1,000 papers, and I found maybe four that were on long-term romance, meaning that there's not a lot out there on it.
Wow.
But the thing that was consistent in those four papers was that if couples were able to maintain a sense of playfulness as well as having shared hobbies, then this was key to them keeping this long-term romance, which they also all said was different than the kind of young and in love romance, which seemed a bit neurotic and high stressed and dysregulating. and allowed for this depth and growth. And I think the thing that's really interesting about having a shared hobby, or if you look at just hobbies in general, there is a curiosity to always find more in your hobby. It's not that like you've kind of mastered it and you're done. And then with playfulness, it requires creativity. So if people can find creativity and curiosity within their relationship, and I think especially within the bedroom, you're going to have a good recipe for a long-term romance.
Sounds great. I love both of your answers so much. I think that the process of dating ought to just go on forever
Mhm.
throughout the relationship, not end
Mm.
with saying I do, you know. Saida, you mentioned an important part of healing a relationship is getting past the blame and victim game. I call
Mhm.
blame relationship cancer. How does one get past seeing oneself as the victim and blaming the other person?
Yeah, well, that was the wake up call, right? So at first, I was a victim of these men who are going out and having affairs, and everyone would agree, and like, you poor thing, and yes, and yes. But at some point, I'm like, well, I'm not healing. Things are not changing. There's a problem going on, and probably some of it is me. And that's when I realized I am adopting a victim stance by not advocating for myself, by not taking a stand, by not sometimes being disagreeable. There were all these things. And so when I stopped blaming others for my problems and really took responsibility for those, then I entered what I call like a sovereign stance. So instead of being victim, I stepped into my sovereignty. And as I stepped into that sovereignty, now I think I felt like I was engaging with life as a whole person, as a real woman and not just a child. And so that was very exciting. And a huge basis of my work is to help women, especially, shift from victim into sovereignty. And this isn't a one-time choice. This is going to happen throughout the day in all kinds of conversations. Am I going to take the victim stance in this moment? Or I'm going to step into the sovereign aspect of myself and speak from there. So because it's a dynamic choice, then it's very, very much alive. It enlivens things. And I just feel it's a really beautiful gift to bring actually to all relationships.
Mm.
Very empowering. Is that the
Mhm.
right word? Empowering. You use
Yes.
the word sovereign, and I think of power when I think of the word sovereign. Anything you care to add to that, Erin?
I just want to say that I have to say it's just so beautiful to be in a relationship with someone that both speaks their truth and also tells me what it is that they want. But the other part of that truth, responsibility, trust, and celebration cycle is an internal one. And I think that that's a big part of sovereignty and something that I definitely see in, it's funny to call her Dr. Desolé, but why not? Maybe it's a little bit of a kink. But to hear her actually then both tell me the things that she wants, but also taking responsibility inside of herself to get that. And for me to be able to do the same, I think really has just been a magnificent, it's been, yeah, it's really created a magnificent relationship between the two of us. And so I just want to honor her for that because these aren't just words, she lives them out.
Well, your relationship is adult to adult, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
Equal to equal. Betrayal often causes a loss of self trust. How does
Mm.
one regain trust in oneself? Erin, would you like to address that?
Well, I think having the ability to keep that curiosity and really look at, okay, well, where is it that I'm responsible in this? And where is it then that the other person has been responsible and really digging in to find out, okay, well, what is the truth? Why did this happen? What is it that's actually being desired here that has been left unspoken? And to be able to do that, one does need to be able to come resourced. And by that, I mean that, make sure that if you're having these discussions that you're well rested, that you're well fed, that maybe you've gone out and had a good time being around people that do support you. So that way then you can really take the strength and the effort that it does to really hear the other person out
Mhm.
and also speak your own truth.
Who we associate with really has a big effect on how we see ourselves, doesn't it? It's
Yes.
one of those components that sometimes is overlooked. Saida, you quoted Dr. Seuss as saying, quote, "Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind." Why did you choose that quote?
It's a quote I've had almost all of my life, partly because I am a very outspoken person. And the friends who've ended up being close to me are the ones who truly love my truth and they celebrate it. And the ones that seem offended by my very existence, they shouldn't be in my space anyway. So it just kind of clears the air, right? So if I can't be myself and you don't like it, well, then we're probably not going to be that close. And it allows for just authenticity to emerge and yeah, just a bravery or a daring within interactions.
It's part of that empowerment.
Yes.
Aaron, you quoted, quote, "You'll never be able to give your full yes unless you know your no is fully celebrated." Tell us what that means to you.
Well, I've just seen so many people coming from a place of consent about what they should say or what they should do. And the ability really to know at your core that if a person asks you something, like what is it you want to do, or they're suggesting that they want to do something, if you can't really be comfortable and say, no, that's not what I want, and know that they actually desire to hear that because they truly want to know what your yes is, then you're never really going to be able to get to it because you're going to kind of, well, take the edge off of your yes. You're not going to be able to speak into it passionately because you're afraid that you might be offending them and you'll have a tendency to placate towards the other person. So I've just noticed when I coach individuals and also just in my own relations, when a person can sit there and go, yes, thank you for telling me no, thank you for showing me my boundaries, then that opens up the playground of possibility.
I love a good no and a firm yes, either one. I'm happy with either one. You can reach Dr. Saida and Aaron at these websites, embodiedlove.com and dareyourdesire.com. I hope
Let's
you'll
embodied love.love.
It's dot love,
do
yeah.
that again.
Embodied love.love.
It's a
Sorry,
dot.
so
No
No,
glad
worries.
you
you're fine.
embodiedlove.love and dareyourdesire.com.
Correct.
Thank you for correcting me. I hope you'll read the full article in Authority Magazine, and I thank you both so much for spending your time with me today.
Oh, it's so wonderful to meet you, Nancy, and thank you so much for all the amazing work you do for people and for love and connection.
And thank you for having us.
And you're making the world a happier place. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.